Katsuki promises vehemently that he will deal with them in the morning, and they'd better get their asses in bed before he chooses to run his sword through them tonight. Needless to say, Adro and you had run to your respective beds, preserving the few hours of life you had left. Though you both feared for the morning, sleep overtook you swiftly, the exhaustion of the past few days engulfing your body, a huge wave sweeping you out to the faraway islands of dreams. Even Katsuki, brimming with fury, was now sound asleep, lightly drifting off with fantasies of what would soon be your nightmares. Which was why no one in the room had heard the door open, nor the careful footsteps belonging to the intruder. They made their way past the slumbering dragon, to your bed where you lay ignorant of their threat looming over you, and the twisted, fiendish grin slashed across their face. The intruder takes hold of the blanket, dragging it off you meticulously, as though savoring the gift they were unwrapping. You shiver at the exposure, but do not wake. The shadows salivated at the vulnerable body before them, their lustful stare scattering their hunger, their craze. Their impatience overcomes them. They must touch now, must feel. A hand reaches out, almost with a mind of its own, and tentatively meets your neck, trailing down and becoming brave with the pressure it exerted. It was at this disturbance that your eyes flutter open, shifting in puzzlement, and then widening when you catch sight of the demon standing over you. Its eyes like black holes swallowing the light, and its stretched lips were more terrifying than a monster's maw. You scream, but a cloth is shoved onto your mouth, smothering your voice. The hand on you becomes an arm holding you down. Shh. It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you if you behave, the demon says, sickeningly sweet, as though it truly thought its words were a comfort. But your movements are lethargic. The cloth in your face smelled abhorrently saccharine. The more you breathed, the heavier you felt, and the stronger your heart beat with panic. Through the growing fog, you hear a sword being drawn, a shout of pain, and the cloth falls from your mouth. You breathe in fresh air, ridding yourself of whatever substance the demon had tried to drug you with. When your mind was clearer, you look up to see Katsuki with his sword tip held firmly at the demon's throat. You realize through horror that you recognized him. He was the man that talked to you at the tavern. You couldn't believe that someone who'd seemed so harmless a few hours ago had assaulted you. "Traveler!" Katsuki yelled, like this wasn't the first time he'd called you. "Are you good?" "Yes," you say shakily. "Sorry, yes, I'm fine." Katsuki had not taken his eyes off the demon, that now knelt bleeding on the inn floor. His side slashed by Katsuki from when he towered over you. "I fucking saw you staring at them in the tavern," Katsuki growled lowly, bridled anger straining to be released. "You better confess your sins now, before I free your filthy head from your god-forsaken body." From the steadiness of Katsuki's blade, you knew he meant it. I just wanted to talk to them," the man said, his demeanor shifting back to the nervous person you'd met, not the demon that had held you down with false reassurances and disgusting vows hidden in his tone. "Wrong answer," Katsuki snarled, raising his sword and slashing down with the force of a lightning strike. "They should be mine," the man blurted out desperately, and Katsuki halted his motion. His sword paused an inch away from the man's neck. "They never give me a chance. None of them give me a chance. So I have to take them. It's only fair." Katsuki's eyes swirled with molten metal. He brought his sword back to the man's neck, stating precisely, with cold anger, "You've done this before." The man swallows, his Adam's apple kissing the point of Katsuki's blade, but he did not reply. "We'll see what the town thinks is fair," he said, and swung the blunt end of his sword down hard on the man's neck. He crumpled instantly onto the small puddle of his own blood. Katsuki begins to walk towards the door, and you shout, suddenly, "Where are you going?" Katsuki turns to you, surprised by your yell. In all honesty, so were you. The spike of fear that had flared in you at the thought of being alone with this man, even unconscious, had been unexpected. It felt illogical, considering the threat had been neutralized. But you would not stay here on your own, with him. Katsuki's stare softened, red-hot fire cooling to rose petals. "I'm just ringing the innkeeper. I'm not leaving the room," he said gently, walking slowly to the string attached next to the door, and tugging it. Distantly, in the quiet of night, you heard a bell jingle. "I saw you had something over your mouth. Where is it?" You pick up the blue cloth that had fallen next to you on the bed, pinching the horrid fabric between your thumb and forefinger. Katsuki takes the fabric with the tip of his sword and brings it to his face. He sniffed, and then wrinkled his nose. "Hypno poppies," he said, with distaste. "They can force you into a deep sleep, like a coma. You'd be gone to the world. Almost like when those bandits captured us, but worse." Katsuki felt sick at the thought of the detestable things this intruder could have done to you while you slept unaware, and his fist urged to meet his face with force. A knock sounded on the door, and you flinched. "It's just the innkeeper," Katsuki said, patiently, dismayed that the few seconds where he had not reacted fast enough had caused you to be so frightened. Katsuki opened the door to a tall woman with long violet hair. "You rang, sir?" He gestured harshly to the unconscious man on the floor. "This fucker managed to break into our room and tried to kidnap my friend, and he used this to do it." Katsuki shoved the cloth into her flabbergasted hands. She looked at the man, frowning with disbelief. "But how can that be? Arlo is harmless." "Well, he wasn't so harmless tonight. I'd investigate his residence. You might find out just how harmless he's been." The woman seemed conflicted, and you didn't blame her. She and this man must have lived in the same small town all of their life, and yet here they were, telling her he'd done something as heinous as trying to kidnap someone in their sleep, when he usually couldn't stutter out a sentence. However, despite her indecision, she moved to ring the bell twice. A moment later, 2 burly guards walked in and removed Arlo from their room. The woman inclined her head. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, sir. We will inform the town's leader and get to the bottom of this." Her choice of words conveyed that she didn't completely believe that her fellow townsmen had been at fault, and Katsuki replied coldly, "Ensure you do," daring her to blame him. She retreated with a skeptical look and shut the door. Katsuki clenched his jaw, probably stationing a guard outside to make sure we don't escape in the night. He huffed. "But I guess that's not really a bad thing. No one else is gonna get in, right?" Katsuki finally turns his gaze back to you, a rare concern shrouding the flames of his eyes. You think his stare prolongs because you hadn't answered, and you say quickly, "Right." But he approaches, consciously, and sits on the bed, holding out his hands with exposed palms. "Your hands," he requests. It's only when you reach out do you notice how violently you are trembling, how harshly you breathed. Katsuki quietly took your hands in his, the heat of his magic projecting from under his skin, the warmth grounding as he lent you something constant to focus on. "He can't hurt you," Katsuki said. "No one can hurt you when you're with us. Me and..." When that stupid lizard isn't in a fucking coma, Edro will keep you safe. You laugh wetly and nod at Katsuki's proclamation. He doesn't rush to retrieve his hands, only waits for you to steady. Should I wake Edro? He asked, knowing the dragon was a comfort to be around. You glance at him, drooling on his pillow. I can't believe he slept through all of that. Fucking pile of rocks for a dragon, Katsuki comments, and you both stare. You shake your head. He's sleeping so peacefully, I couldn't disturb him. Probably dreaming about meat, you say fondly. I think I'm okay now. Reluctantly, you withdraw from his grasp, meeting his gaze to show your gratitude. Thank you for... Katsuki nodded once, to show he understood, eyeing you critically. You think you'll be able to go back to sleep? Yeah, you assure him. He seems doubtful, but returns to his bed, and you slip back into your covers. You turn on your side and close your eyes, hoping that exhaustion will overtake you once again. But instead an orchestra of little sounds made themselves known. You swear you could hear the creaks of the floorboards and the rustle of clothing as a person moves, and decide perhaps having your back to the door was not the wisest. However, once you turn to the door, your eyes refuse to close. What if the demon came back and you were caught unaware once again? You're fixated on the door, despite the only true movement being Edro's heavy breaths. Just fucking come here, Katsuki snaps. You jerk up to look at him in surprise, having expected him to already be asleep. His sleep had been interrupted twice now. You look at him unsurely, and he sighs. I can't sleep either, he admits. You understood. Having someone break in while you lay defenseless in your sleep can be rather scary, even if Katsuki wouldn't reveal that out loud. You crawl out of bed and hesitantly ask, would it be okay if I sleep on the wall side? Want me to get kidnapped instead? No, you started in alarm. It's just, I'm kidding. Katsuki cuts you off shortly. Sorry, he mumbles. Too soon, I guess. You appreciate that he attempted to bring light to the abominable event that had occurred, and you try to reciprocate. Like they'd even be able to carry you. Katsuki snorted, a sense of pride blooming in his chest at your resilience. You were a survivor, despite your circumstance. You climb into the bed, thankful it was a double and they wouldn't have to squeeze together like last time. You felt a lot more secure knowing Katsuki was just an arm's reach away. What might have happened if he wasn't such a light sleeper? Perhaps nothing would have happened if you just stayed in the room to begin with, you thought glumly. Your eyes flick up impulsively, and you find Katsuki staring back at you with an unreadable expression. I'm sorry for taking Edro to the tavern, you say quietly. It ended up being a bad idea, huh? What happened now wasn't your fault. That guy was a creep, Katsuki said softly. And as for sneaking out... He exhales, as though exasperated. You just have a stupidly big, bleeding heart, like Edro. I don't think you idiots can help it. He glances back at you. I'm not mad. Thanks, you mumble gratefully. Then hesitantly touch his arm and look up hopefully. Katsuki's sharp eyes capture the movement, and he huffs. Just for tonight. You can cling to Edro tomorrow. You hum and press your head to his bicep, taking comfort in his strength and presence. You're finally able to close your eyes and exhale the tension. Your breath is nearly even and your mind far to the edges of your consciousness when Katsuki grumbles, I was gonna get him that stupid pie for tomorrow, just so you know. You chuckle against his arm. I should have known. You'd fallen asleep quickly after that, your heart a little lighter, but Katsuki could not follow. Adrenaline still pumped in his veins and served to intensify the figures in the shadows. The image of the demon holding you down was seared into his eyelids, taunting him with his inadequacy. How had he allowed that foul man to get close enough to touch you, to almost take you? It paralleled too closely with the night when he'd almost lost you at sea, when he'd been just as scared of sirens snatching you away in the night and ordered you to his bed. A few hours later, he was thankful he had. His eyes snapped open the instant his cape had shifted. Finding you sitting up and struggling out of the tight tuck he'd placed. A distant siren call beyond the cotton in his ears. Katsuki had grabbed your arm to halt your escaping. Your movement stilled, and your head turned sluggishly to face him. When your eyes met his, they were blank, unseeing, and he knew you were not really there. The siren was different from the previous, more powerful, and it had not grasped onto surface temptations, but deep into your subconscious to lure you out. As you stared blindly at him, your eyes swelled with tears, overflowed, and dripped steadily down your face. Though you held no expression, Katsuki knew there was pain hidden within, bred from the siren's fake offerings that Katsuki was preventing you from taking. He pulled you back to the bed and hastily placed an arm around you, stroking your hair in an attempt to comfort. "It's okay, traveler. We're gonna get you home," he'd said, unsure if you could even hear him, unsure if he'd even said the right words, only considering that the siren must have utilized your desire to return to your own world to affect you. How else could their pull be so strong, even through the cotton? Katsuki had waited for you to close your eyes once more before he tried to sleep again. He stared at you now, frowning, as he wondered just when he'd become so devoted to keeping you safe. For once, Edro had been the first to rise the next morning, likely because his sleep had been uninterrupted. And when he had woken, he'd woken you and Katsuki in a panic over the bloodstains on the floor. He was horrified when you had explained the ordeal that occurred while he slept, and then proceeded to fuss over you the whole morning. You would have found it endearing if he wasn't also apologizing every 2 minutes for making you go out and buy those pies for him. You tried to placate him by saying it was your choice to go out, but his teary eyes showed that he did not believe he was blameless. His behavior had become so drastic that Katsuki had intervened, snapping at him. "They were nearly kidnapped, but you're making them comfort you? Stop whining, dumb dragon!" You tried Katsuki for being mean, when Edro was just feeling guilty for not being able to help more. But Edro snuffed and said, "No, he's right, traveler. I should be comforting you, and from now on, I'm never going to leave your side." Katsuki rolled his eyes. You already stuck to them like a clingy pup. When you three had headed out of the inn that morning, the innkeeper had been pale. She apologized for what had happened and explained that they had found evidence that Arlo had been kidnapping passing tourists in the town, but she wouldn't elaborate further. She had gifted their money back for their stay for the misunderstanding, and that had placed Katsuki in a pleasant mood. Enough so that he had returned the 2 pies he'd taken from them as punishment and allowed Edro to eat them for breakfast, even going so far as to buy another 2 for you and him on the go. As you're exiting the town, happy to leave the place behind and never return to the terrifying memory, you notice a murmuring crowd gathered at the outskirts. You glance over curiously, unknowing of what you'd see. "Traveler, don't look!" Edro had shouted, but he was too late. Ahead of you and the crowd stood a tall tree, which Arlo's body now hung from. You could not tear your eyes away from the swaying corpse, and Edro pulled you quickly into his chest and blocked your view, but he could not block out the voices of the townspeople. I can't believe Arlo. He seemed like such a sweet boy. To think he was actually capable of... How are they going to get rid of them all? They've already begun, I think. Ah, here they come. I hope word of this doesn't get out. No one will want to pass through here again. Edro urged you forward as you heard wagon wheels behind you. He tried to keep your head down, but the wagon passed them on their way out of the town. There was a pile atop it, a pile of 10 or 15 rapidly deteriorating corpses, jolting as the wagon snagged stones. I heard they were pristine when they got them, the townspeople whispered, but as soon as they took them out of the house, they instantly began to rot. What on earth was he doing to all of them? You did not want to hear the answer to that question. Katsuki and Edro hurried you out, taking a path far from the trail the wagon took. Though Edro wanted to shield you from the sight, he too couldn't help but look. Nausea stirred his stomach at the thought of Katsuki not intervening, at the possibility of you being amongst the countless bodies that had apparently been found at that man's house. Only, you wouldn't have been found. Come on, you two, Katsuki snapped, bringing him back to the present. Let's get out of here. And I can see you both thinking about it. Stop. We would have never let that happen. He said it so forcefully, as though to convince himself along with them. You nod, taking a deep breath. Yeah, I know. Edro didn't seem keen of letting go of you, so you stayed, your head snuggled into his chest, and his arms secured around you protectively. It was a comfort to have you, living and breathing in his arms. Katsuki glanced over, confused by the small spikes of envy he felt, bewildered by his own feelings, but knowing that if he could just reach out, to also take comfort in each other's presence, like you and Edro did so easily, the feeling would cease to exist. But his pride held him back. He planted himself to face the horrifying scenes of demons in the shadows and lifeless bodies on his own.